Right, I've changed the title of the talk. It's not about airports, it's a little bit about airports. It's about an area I'm really passionate about. It's about planes, about the security of planes, hacking them and having fun. A little bit about me. I am a pilot, but I'm a really shit pilot. I've landed at the wrong airport once. I have had an engine failure, which was quite scary. I've had 2 gear failures, which didn't come down. That was fun. And I've nearly crashed into other planes 3 times. So never ever fly with me. I've also told air traffic control I was there when I was actually there. Yeah. Fortunately for everybody here, whilst I was planning to go commercial, it never happened. The company I was working for at the time went tits up, and that was how I was funding it. So whilst I've done my commercial exams, I've never actually made it to an airline. So back in 2002, I founded a pen testing firm and carried on flying light aircraft, doing cool shit like flying my favourite plane in the world, which is the Piper Cherokee 6. I've taken it into Courchevel, very nearly crashed into the snow. I also went out to the Baltic States to learn to fly old Russian airliners. They're great fun. Anyway, who am I? I'm part of a team at PTP. There's about 130 of us. Quite a few of us are pilots, some of us ex-commercial pilots. Back in the day, I got to combine my 2 passions, flying and hacking shit. And with 3 other people, we co-founded the DEFCON Aerospace Village. And along the way, I've got to mess around with Airbuses, 747s. We've got to publish research in flight bags, in flight entertainment systems. And we've done some weird things around making planes crash into each other and other fun things. Before we start, there's something about hacking planes that the media seems to lose their minds about. As soon as you say the word plane and hack, everything goes to shit. And there's been numerous cases of stuff being disclosed that wasn't factually accurate, but the world lit up. You can hack a plane. You can't. It's really not that easy. So I think we need to be really, really careful as an industry not to spook the travelling public. My wife isn't a great flyer. The last thing I want to do is make her travelling experience worse. So we need to be careful. It also takes a long time to fix shit on aircraft. You don't do Google Project Zero in 90 days. It can take a few weeks to fix some software. It can take a few months or even years to recertify that software to be certain it doesn't blue screen the flight management system mid-flight. It takes a long time. You do not disclose after 90 days. There have been numerous cases where I think people got carried away, journalists got carried away, people misunderstood, which really badly damaged, I think, the impact of the ethical hacking community on the aviation space. So we need to be really careful. But something happened in 2020. It used to be really, really hard to get access to aeroplanes to try and do vanilla research. And then the world's fleets of planes got laid up for a little while on the back of this horrible thing called COVID. And that changed. It changed everything. All of a sudden, you had entire fleets of aircraft laid up. They were never going to fly again. We rang one of the breakers yards with all these tails lined up. They said, what's happening to those planes? Well, they're going to be sat there for the next 3 or 4 years because we're backed up. We can't take planes apart fast enough and no one's buying the parts. So they're just going to sit there. I said, all right, if we give you cash to fire up the auxiliary power unit and fire up the systems, can we come and hack them? They're like, okay, never going to fly again. So we got to do live, world first pen testing on planes. Did most of it at Kemble Airfield in Gloucester, although we've been to other places too. It's hard to mess around with planes. Lots of really unusual custom protocols. Lots of things you've got a vertical learning curve over. There's all sorts of connectivity on our planes. So good examples, so you might have up front SATCOMs. Even on a plane where there isn't in-flight Wi-Fi, the pilots are probably going to have SATCOMs. You'll have Wi-Fi for you, you'll have the in-flight entertainment system. Up front, you'll have things like the flight management computer, which may be connected, electronic flight bag will go to in a bit. They also have things like maintenance exchangers, data loaders, and even as soon as the plane lands and puts weight on wheels, it'll spool up the wireless quick access recorder, which is like the mini black box, which will get all the flight data into the operator, into the airline, really, really quickly. If you've ever walked onto a 320, you'll see a panel on the left as you walk in. If you're nodding, pretending you're not drunk to the flight crew. Anyway, that is called the flight attendants panel. That has some connectivity. One up front, there's one at the back on a 350 called the cabin management terminal, which can do a lot more. But the great thing about it all is, guess what? Boeing, Airbus and others really thought about security when they designed their planes. Wow! So, as a result of which, you have some really strong domain-based segregation between the various systems on the plane. So in the back, you've got the passenger information entertainment systems domain and the pod, the passenger-owned devices domain. That's in the dirty bit. That's where we sit. No one really cares about that. That's the dirty bit of the network. And it's not connected to anything other than the SATCOM unit, which will send you out on a separate connection. You've then got another domain, the Airborne Information Services domain, AISD, which sits here, which is for the cabin crew, which can do a little bit more. So you can do things like send ACARS telex messages to the ground. You can do ground interaction, but really you can't do that much. I'll go into the details of a more interesting CMT later. Up front, we have the aircraft control domain. The uppy-downy, lefty-righty bit, if you like. The safety bit. That is not connected to the rest. Other than in some cases, there's a one-way data diode that will send a feed from the move to populate your moving map. But it's not connected. You cannot just hack the flight control systems from your seat. So if you can't hack planes, what's the talk actually about? Well, it's a few interesting things for me. I want to talk about flight bags, airports, GPS, in-flight entertainment, and if there's time, a little bit about some stuff in the movies. Starting with the FBs, the electronic flight bag. When you walk in, take a look. Say hello to the pilots. They'll be working on a couple of tablets, most likely an iPad, though we do see Android tablets too. We also see Windows devices. What does the FB do? Absolutely loads. Back in the day when I was flying commercially, you'd go on with a great big briefcase which would contain your paper charts. It would weigh a ton. It would have everything on. It would have your approach plates for airports, your departure plates. It would have your maps, your charts, and so much else. That's all being reduced to an iPad now. It does everything. It does weight and balance. It does your engine performance. We'll talk about that in a minute. It has your charts, your approach plates. It has everything. It has the passenger information list. Everything is on there. And increasingly, why at the moment they are not integrated into the airplane as a separate device. There are a number of protocols emerging. For example, on the A350, you have integration of the EFB into the flight management system over a protocol called ARINC 834, which is plain text. Wow, what could possibly go wrong? Anyway, so let's talk about some of the FBs. Now, I've been involved with loads of airlines and operators, know loads of pilots, because I feel I play in. And it blows my mind that in numerous cases we find those EFBs are really, really poorly locked down. So no pin at all, or they'll have a really simple pin, or one major UK operator who the pin is the pilot's birthday. Great. We find EFBs without any lockdown, no device management, pilots in smaller operators told to go and buy their own from Curry's. Like, wow, okay. And we'll also find a huge chasm of misunderstandings between ground-based IT ops and the pilot. So the great example of this is one of the key devices you're going to have on your iPad. You're going to have your electronic quick reference handbook, the EQRH. And when shit goes sideways, that's what you check. Right? When you get an engine out, when you get a depressurization event, when something goes wrong, when an air conditioner fails, when a fuse blows, you go to EQRH. It tells you what to do. You go through the steps, bang, bang, bang. This is how to safely manage the incident. Now, one of the times you're going to need that quick reference handbook is in a depressurization event. And what we often find with lockdowns is everyone goes, yeah, let's use biometrics, let's use face IDs, it's easy for the pilot. But you've just had a window pop out and the pilot is now wearing reflective sunglasses or maybe even a gas mask. So we really need to think about making sure that ground-based IT ops truly understand how things work on the flight line. Otherwise, you can end up with security getting in the way of safety. And that is not a good idea. So I want to talk about a few incidents that are kind of cyber-related. One, big one, got a lot of coverage. This was Raven Air. They had their maintenance systems ransomware, lost both. No maintenance system. You can't prove your planes are airworthy. You can't go. That was it. They went tits up. Another really interesting one. So this is American. There was a chart application from Jeppesen, which you absolutely have to have. You can't move on the airport without having a chart. And there was a duplicate chart published for Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. And it caused all the FBs to lock up. They duplicated the chart. Everyone lost their AFB. So nothing moved. That caused chaos. Southwest. Weather is really important when you're flying. It's not like you can just look out the window and go, yeah, it's a bit rainy. No, you need to know about your winds aloft, turbulence, efficient routing, and they lost their weather feed. I'm not entirely sure how, but Southwest didn't go that morning. Another really interesting vulnerability. And this one's fascinating because everything that happens in aviation is published and shared. So we all learn from it. That's why aviation is so safe to do. It's why it's such a great way of travelling safely. As a result of which, we know about things, we can learn from them. Great example here. There was a sync issue. A last-minute plane type change from a 320 to a 321 wasn't synced with the weight and balance. The load sheet wasn't changed. As a result of which, as you probably know, the 320 is quite a bit shorter than the 321. The plane was loaded as if it was a 320 towards the front, which meant there were no passengers in the back. And that put it out of the weight and balance envelope, which meant pilot shoves on power, trundle off down the runway, comes to VR, rotation speed, beyond the point of no return, which is V1, pulls back, nothing happens. Can't stop now. What do? Unfortunately, very, very well-trained pilot goes, okay, toga power, takeoff, go around, gives the engines everything, and the rotating moments of the engines, because they dangle from the wings, force the nose into the air. Crazy, hey? So there were no issues with this. They flew away quite happily. They landed quite happily. But at a critical phase of flight, rotation, an issue led to a problem. Now the crazy one. This, you might not be aware, but we actually very rarely use full thrust in a jet aircraft nowadays. Why? Well, it wears the engines when you do, burns a lot of fuel, which is expensive, and sticks out a lot of carbon dioxide as well, which we don't want to do because we're green industry, right? Now, in order to not use full power, we need to do a series of calculations. They're called performance or perf, and we will take multiple different inputs. For example, the length of the runway, the weight of the plane, the pressure altitude rate. Are we high? Are we low? Wind speed. So many different things we take into this. It tells us what amount of power we use. In the case of Airbus, it's called a flex temp departure. In the case of Boeing, it's called a D rate. So you'll be given a percentage, which tells you how much power to apply to safely go away. One of those key calculations is the length of the runway. I've got a lot of runway, I don't seem to need so much power to get to speed. Unfortunately, there was an incident at Lisbon Airport in Portugal where there were some runway marking changes to do with some runway maintenance, and it meant that a bunch of pilots put the wrong intersection into their departure point. They were starting here, but they miscalculated this whole plane, the performance calculator, they were here. You've got 3,000 metres of runway, not 1,800, so they get a much bigger D rate, and went off down the runway, and finally became airborne about 50 metres before the threshold wobbled into the sky. Again, they reached their screen height, so they were too low for safety, but there were no further incidents. That was very quickly fixed. Again, fascinating. We've now got pilots making mistakes just through data inputs going wrong. There was a case last year where Alaskan Airlines had two tail strikes within a few minutes of each other. Their electronic flight bag application that did these calculations had a bug. It spat out the wrong power setting, and the most likely thing that happens in the case of missetting the thrust is you bang the tail of the aircraft. It's a very expensive thing to do. They pulled a ground stop until they found what the problem was. When I say bang the tail of the aircraft, you get 2 or 3 tail strikes a day around the world. Some of them are just taking paint off, others rip the pressure bulkhead out. That was pretty horrible. That was a miscalculation. This was a whole lot worse. This was a miscalculation made on a 747 freighter. The pilots were very tired. They tapped in the weight of the plane. They miscalculated by £100,000, and that derated the engine so far the plane never actually made it into the air, and they crashed very sadly into the ILS berm, and everybody sadly died. So, yeah, if we miscalculate things, bad things can happen. You can even do the same. You need to know how much braking you need to use so you don't wear the brakes and the tyres too much. So that was an overrun at Quito Airport in South America. And it doesn't take much to change the data to the point where a plane will have a runway excursion, which is a great euphemism for having a crash, right? So let's talk about some of the vulnerabilities we found in EFB packages that lead to these. So the first one we ever found was in Boeing's OPT, their onboard performance tools. If like any Boeing tin, you'll be using this tool to do your departure calculations. It spits out lots of data. I've played around with Boeing's versions of these in Seattle. Spits out the information. V1, that's the point at which you can put the brakes on and stop safely. VR, that's your rotation point. V2, that's the point at which you can fly away with only one engine. So the gap between the V1 and V2 is quite a scary place sometimes. If you lose an engine there, you're in big trouble. Unfortunately, the issue in Boeing's OPT package was that they didn't validate any of the data in the underlying signal-like databases in their pack, which meant with a short period of physical access, you could tamper with that data and, for example, extend the runway length to the maximum 10K, and it would then derate the engines way more than appropriate. Another fun one, this was in the cockpit of a 747 we were working on. I don't know how they got away with this. It's kind of a semi-installed Windows tablet, and using those amazing skills of Control, Shift and Escape, break out the app, and we didn't even need to. So once you discovered two of these devices, both with the password up front in the cockpit, yes, great. They were both networked together, so the whole point with planes, we carry two of everything for redundancy, sometimes three, but because they were networked together, pwn one, pwn the other, you're sorted. Yeah, that was great. We also found a vulnerability. We believe these could have been compromised over wireless as well. They were so out of date. And you'll often see fun things like this to stop you doing a bash bunny of the USB, so they'll put a sticker over it instead. I see that all the time. Do not use the USB stick. Anyway, good. Hey, it's not just Boeing. They had quite a bit of bad press, didn't they? We've had very similar things with Airbus products. So Napoli is a subsidiary of Airbus. We found almost exactly the same vulnerability in FlySmart LCNG as a less paper cockpit next gen. You could just tamper with all the data again and cause the pilots to make the wrong calculations and overrun the runway. Bad day. Actually, a little bit more on this one. So Boeing were insanely good. Probably the most receptive about any vulnerability we've ever disclosed. They unprompted gave us an update every couple of weeks. They said it's going to take us longer than 90 days. Is that okay? Absolutely fine. And they kept coming back to say, this is what we've done, this is what we're doing, this is what we're validating. And finally said, right, we fixed, we want to do coordinated disclosure, can we do a press release together? And do you want to go in our Hall of Fame? Go, Boeing. They got something right. Good on you. Airbus, on the other hand, denied this vulnerability. They said fixing it would be a product improvement. Like, what? Okay. So we can tamper with the performance calculator and make planes overrun the runway. Okay, whatever. In the end, I was advised by an operator, one of the airlines, to have a chat with the regulator. And in one of the regulations, AMC 2025A, about 40 pages, it said, you must validate any data in your electronic flight bags. Airbus, hold my beer. Anyway, and they fixed it. Thank you. They also found another vulnerability. You could actually... mind-blowing this. One of the joys about IOS is it enforces application transport security by default. Amazingly, Airbus had disabled ATS in their app, which meant you could man in the middle over Wi-Fi. I went, wow, when was the last time that worked? Even better is, practically man in the middle, really? Nah, not going to work. But actually, it does work in this context because pilots always stay in the same layer of hotels every night. So if you know the hotels that they use, you can just go there and you'll be able to man the middle of pilot and tamper with their database. Fun. Another one, so Lufthansa, they also have an IT products business called Lufthansa Systems, and a very popular application they use for charting is called the Lido eRoute Manual. They had a very similar problem. They did cryptographically sign the data underlying or their charting applications, but unfortunately the key was 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, thanks guys. In fairness, Lufthansa were also really good, but what it meant you could do, so this is a representation. This is an approach plate. It tells you how to do an instrument-based approach, so crowds. It tells you how to approach the airport if they don't have an instrument landing system, so it's a non-precision approach. I'll explain it. So D, that's distance from the DME, distance measuring equipment, so distance 14 nautical miles from the BRA VOR, so that's a ground-based radio beacon. So 14 miles out, at 5,000 feet vertically, you hit your initial fix. You carry on level, you get nearly 12.7, you now descend 4,600 feet without crashing the ground. At the top of the descent, D12.4, you then take a magnetic barrier 170 and you descend 3,900 feet. The DME 9, where you get final approach at 3,900 feet. You can now descend to the minimum descent altitude to the middle marker of DME 4. You can now see the runway landing before you go around and try again. Unfortunately, because of that encryption key being really simple, you could just change it and cause the plane to descend below minimum safe altitude and fly into terrain. Otherwise known as crashing. Bad day. I'm going to touch on the airport because I said I would. There's lots of fun systems there, a couple of fun ones. We were doing a job for an airport a while back, and we found access to the departure walls. cool, amazing client said we could add our own flight to it. How cool is that? So we added the PTP party flight, took a photograph, and then, so that was all good. This is, who's been at Heathrow T5 in the last few years? Great, you seen these things? The motor tugs? I have been desperately trying to convince BA to let me have a crack at one of these, and they're like, anyway, spam out the snip while we're out there. It's done some really interesting things. They use it to do single-person dispatch, which saves the cost of a large tug and a second operator, so keeps costs down. Cannot wait to get hands on one of those. There's also some really interesting stuff that goes on with fueling, because fueling is never provided by the operator, it's provided by MEP, Shell, etc. And there's some really interesting API integration to manage fueling between the fuel handler and the plane itself. So there's some work to be done there as well. I do want to touch, if there's time, on GPS. I'm sure everyone has heard stories about GPS jamming and spoofing over the last few months. I want to go into a bit more detail on this. This is based on a talk I did at DEF CON last year. If you want to read up more, follow Ops Group, really, really cool bunch of operations engineers at the various airlines. I'm involved in it as well. It's great. Now, why? What's happened? Why are we seeing all this? Well, we've always had spoofing in the Black Sea, right? We've seen spoofing and jamming in the Black Sea around the Russian naval fleet. Fine. We're used to that. It's usually a course area around 20 nautical miles. Around various areas of conflict, so particularly around Ukraine, particularly around the Middle East right now, we're seeing increasing use of consumer drones, which don't use mill GPS, they use consumer GPS, and therefore if you don't want to be bombed by a drone, you need to jam and spoof it. But that has massive collateral impact upon everything up there, which is flying around and now losing its GPS. Position reports have jumped enormously. One of the big issues we're starting to see is around the ground proximity warning system firing off whilst you're on an ILS approach, telling you you're about to fly into a mountain. Now, you can't be because you're on the ILS. But what do you have to do? The right thing to do is go around, try again, and maybe disable your ground proximity warning system, which sounds quite dangerous, doesn't it? We've also started seeing poisoning of other systems. So, in the past, we used to use inertial reference, so laser gyros, which gave us almost the precision of GPS, but now GPS is out, might as well use that. So even our backup system, IRS, the inertial reference system, because the GPS is always more accurate, actually we update IRS referencing from GPS. So you end up with a silly situation where you've got a poisoned GPS signal, now poisons your backup system, your inertial reference system, so that's causing problems. So it's not just a temporary problem. If you go from an area where you were being spoofed and now come out of the area of spoofing, it's going to cause consequential problems. So we'll use a multi-mode receiver to gather lots of different signal types, including GPS. The problem being is if you've been spoofed, when you then come out of the area of spoofing, your MMR now can't pick up where the satellites were supposed to be. The almanac is out of date. It thinks it's somewhere else, so it can't reacquire. We've had lots of cases where planes have had to fly the remainder of their journey after spoofing with no GPS support at all. So once you get on the ground, you can then realign the almanac. Basically, you turn it off and on again, but you don't do that up there. And that's causing all sorts of issues. I was chatting to some pilots in the cockpit on Wednesday night, and they were saying, yeah, if we go through spoofing, we lose GPS for the remainder of the flight. Interesting. More modern designs of MMR seem to be more resistant to this type of problem. We're also seeing problems with ground-based radio navigation being retired. So you'll be familiar with the idea of the instrument landing system, which is ground-based, VOR, which is a technology from the Second World War that we still use today, non-directional beacons, that sort of thing. Those are quite expensive things to maintain. So you have to calibrate your ILS with mirrors in a plane every year. So everyone's retiring their ILS because GPS-based approach is cheaper and more accurate. Not anymore. And we had a really interesting incident at Tartu Airport in Estonia, and Finnair had to suspend their flights because the airport had retired their ILS and then they got jammed to shit. So planes couldn't arrive safely. You could do visual approaches and nothing else. And then things got really silly. We do, as well we know, GPS is actually time. It's not really position, it's time. And we're using the differences in time to calculate our position. However, we're also starting to see time being spoofed as well. Now, initially, around spoofing incidents, you'd see the clock drift by a few seconds. And then the pilot will go, okay, I'll go from GPS clock to local clock. Great, fantastic. Something really significant happened a little while ago. It hasn't had much coverage. GPS time went forward in a really coarse manner. It went forward by a couple of years. And because the pilots couldn't switch their local clock quickly enough, it caused a cascade of issues. And some of you who've ever dealt with SSL certificates going out of date will probably recognise this. Is that the time change was then populated into all the other systems on the plane, and a bunch of other stuff failed because of it. Anything using encrypted comms then failed because the time was wrong and the digital certificates weren't invalid, weren't out of date, they weren't valid yet as we got into the future. First thing that happened, the pilot passenger Wi-Fi went offline because the certs weren't valid. They then lost control of the pilot data link comms, CPDLC, which requires better than 1 second sync. So this is it's a bit like controller to pilot text messaging, if you will. So rather than having to do it on the radio, which is slow and time-consuming and open to misinterpretation, we do it using CPDLC, and the controller sends a message to say, climb 3,000 feet, pressure setting this, routing that. Much better way of doing it. So that failed. And then a bunch of other things failed. And the only comms that were left on the plane was VHF radio. So it had to do the whole lot on VHF. Now, everybody landed fine, but that caused issues. Okay, so it was one plane, but imagine it's now 20 planes being operated by the same controller. Controller workload now goes through the roof, and that's where mistakes happen. So that could cause real issues too. Now, what was really awkward about this is through one spoofing incident involving time, because we protect against rollback in GPS, we can roll forward, we can delete seconds, but we don't roll back, we protect. So they couldn't bring the time back again. So they had to pretty much refresh every component on the airplane, which had it out of action for 2 weeks. So this is mad, right? 2 weeks from something as simple as a basic software-defined radio could cause 2 weeks of outage for an airplane. That's mad, right? Good news is the future is hybrid GPS, which correlates ground-based systems with satellite-based systems, and any coarse moves will clearly be picked up. This is emerging. Later components do appear to be more resilient, but I don't think we should be relying on pilots to detect spoofing and change the clock from GPS to local. Yeah. Everyone wants to retire the expensive ground-based navigational aids, but I think we need to be more careful. Right, I'm going off on a tangent again now. I want to talk a little bit about some fun stuff we've done on retired airplanes. So we were working on a 747. It had been flying about 3 months prior to us getting on board. This is the cabin management terminal. If you go on a BA flight, all 747s, they had a sort of cupboard under the stairs. You go in there and play around with the cabin management terminal. We had to pick the fluff out of the RJ45 in order to get it to go in, but we did get it powered up. It did work. It did take power. We got it up and running. And the build date was 1994. It's like, and this was flying in 2020. Wow. So you do find some very, very old systems knocking around on planes. What was fun, actually, was trying to work out how you could get an exploit to work on this on such an old version of the OS. Even NetSend doesn't work. It's like, wow, there's a lot of dependencies there we were missing. Particularly, we were missing scripting as well. So I think Service Pack 3 it was running didn't have scripting support. You needed Service Pack 4 for that. We did finally manage to get a USB exploit working on it. Another crazy plane we were looking at the cabin management terminal that managed the in-flight entertainment system, and realised that by going hard at it, get the S3 bucket created it used when it hit the ground, landed, in order to sync content. But once we had the S3 bucket creds, we had read-write, we could now read-write anything. So as soon as the next plane landed, it would pick up all the donkey porn that we loaded onto the AWS buckets. Now, actually, they were quite good. We told them about it, they got it fixed quite quickly. Could you cause a safety incident by changing the content on an IFE? I did do a thought exercise with one of the Airbus team, and we came to the conclusion that if you could get everyone to run towards the front of the plane at a critical stage of flight, you might be able to cause an out-of-balance issue that caused a stall. But I don't know. I think all it would really result in is bad PR. We could also knock out the entire in-flight entertainment system as well for our whole flight. That was bad. And then we do still see some really bad password hygiene. So this is one of the galleys. So that's the Wi-Fi satellite terminal, that's the Wi-Fi forum, and on the door, a very wargame style was written password. Great. Come on, we can do better than this. Good. We've got just enough time to talk about some fun. 1 minute. Wow. Okay. I won't talk about airplane hacking in the movies. What I will do is I will go towards the end of this. Bit of advice. Don't hack planes. You'll get arrested and put in jail unless you've got permission. You can get access to planes if you get permission and you pay. They will want money to, even if it's the APU, they'll be burning Jet A1. Even if you've got ground power, it's still going to be expensive. It costs about £100 an hour to power up a 747. But hey, it's fun, right? They are around. I'm hoping we might be able to do an open house on a 747 that we know well soon. We'll let you know about that one. Planes are complicated. They have technical debt. They are legacy. Their security model is primarily physical. But they do design security in with a great deal of thought. Their aircraft control domain is really well locked down. If you do find vulnerabilities in aviation, be aware that disclosure is different. We can help, or you can also get involved in the Aviation ISAC, which Sean works for. He's really cool. The Aviation ISAC is the most amazing thing. A bunch of direct competitors in the aviation industry get together and exchange threat intelligence with each other. We got hit with this. Watch for it. Okay, we'll get hit with that. Absolutely bloody brilliant for it. And also, please, this is my request, if you ever come to DEFCON, come and get involved in DEFCON Aerospace Village. I co-founded it. I love supporting it. It's an amazing community of people that come together to push the boundaries of aviation cyber forward. Thanks for listening. Appreciate it.